Welcome everyone to Keep It Classy Tech. In this video I'm going to be looking at Halo Infinite and these claims from Microsoft that it fully takes advantage of Dolby Vision, and I gotta say either that was a lie or it was horribly done, because Dolby Vision is the worst HDR mode to play in on Halo Infinite, and I'm going to show you why. Now we will keep in mind that this is just the multiplayer, and it's possible that the campaign could be different, though I wouldn't hold your breath, as we have yet to see Dolby Vision make any real difference in gaming up to this point so far, and if anything it's a detriment in that there's increased posterization when playing with Dolby Vision. So here on the top left you can see the LG C1 cycling through HDR10 with it says HDR tone mapping, but it's actually dynamic tone mapping, either on, off, or set to HGiG. On the top right, we have the game running in Dolby Vision on the C1, and then I also included running on an A80J on the bottom right, which doesn't support HGiG, however it does have its own tone mapping algorithms of gradation preferred or brightness preferred. We're going to look at three different kinds of areas. First with a bright sun, which you could see in the Dolby Vision was every bit as muted and dull as it was on the HDR tone mapping set to off, either on the LG or the A80J. And then we're going to look at this scene here, look at the reflections on the walls of the yellow light hitting. And again, Dolby Vision is just very muted and dark. You see a little bit more color, but that's because there's less brightness. The Dolby Vision mode is very dim and not very good looking. And then here, looking at the lights on the walls, you can see just how much brighter turning HGiG on the LG is, or setting HDR tone mapping to on really makes it very bright. And on the Sony, the gradation preferred pretty much matches HGiG, and brightness preferred is kind of in between HGiG and dynamic tone mapping turned on the LG. And in my opinion, brightness preferred on the Sony actually looks best on this game of all of these comparisons. And now if you go into the game's brightness settings, you can see it's just literally raising the black level. The brightness should just be left at default here. And then there's a bug also where sometimes the game will show you an HDR slider and sometimes it will not. However, it doesn't really make a difference because anything over default doesn't increase the HDR effect, doesn't increase the brightness, doesn't do anything. Whether you're on HGiG off or on, increasing it over 50, literally there's no noticeable effect. And then turning it down is just going to hurt your HDR experience. So don't worry about that slider if it doesn't show up, because there's no point to it. And regardless of how you're playing the game, just leave the brightness and HDR sliders at the default middle setting. Maybe if you have a really cheap TV that says it supports HDR, although it's one of those ones that takes an HDR signal and shows it just an SDR, maybe those sliders might do something there, but I highly doubt it. Pretty much just don't worry about them, leave them at default. So in order to disable Dolby Vision for the game, you go into your Xbox settings and you'll see there's an option where you can toggle on Dolby Vision for gaming or toggle it off. I suggest leaving it off. There is not any game so far that I can suggest having that turned on, at least not yet. And if you are seeing a difference when playing in Dolby Vision, it is likely to do with the settings of your television, in that Dolby Vision is a different picture mode, so it could have different settings, different white points. So if everything was set the same, the only difference you could possibly see is in the way that it retains highlight detail and how bright it gets. But so far there really isn't any reason to have Dolby Vision turned on in gaming. And again, it does cause more posterization than HDR10, especially at 120 FPS or 120 Hertz. So I can't recommend using Dolby Vision at this time. If a game comes out in the future that actually is natively created for Dolby Vision in mind and has a benefit to it, then I will do a video on that and I'll let you know. So overall, I can't say that I'm disappointed, because I did not expect this to actually be Dolby Vision or be any good in Dolby Vision, so it's pretty much as I expected and as we have seen so far. I really think the Xbox having Dolby Vision is just a marketing thing, just for them to say they have it, but they aren't using it like they could be. So that's pretty much it for Halo Infinite with Dolby Vision. If for whatever reason the campaign is different, I will do a follow-up and update that, but I wouldn't expect it to. So here's just a little bit of gameplay playing on the LG C1 in 4K 120 Hz with VRR and HGiG enabled. This would be the most accurate, best way to play. I think a lot of people are actually going to like the dynamic tone mapping set to on, though. The only issue that I saw with that is in the darker areas, the highlights kind of lose their color. It's like earlier in the video when we were in that third area of the map and there's those blue lights on the wall with HDR tone mapping set to on instead of HGiG. Those lights weren't really blue anymore. They were pretty white. So that's the only downside I've seen so far. But if you're in a bright outdoor area, it really does push the panel to be a whole lot brighter, and it looks much more LCD-like. So for the most part, I think most people are just going to like the HDR tone mapping set to on with LG TVs. And like I said, I think for Sony's, brightness preferred is actually doing very nicely in that I'm not seeing any loss in highlight detail. And it is lifting the dark and mid-tone areas just a little bit. And for gaming, a game like this, competitive shooter, raising those shadows is a advantage. And it does help the outdoor areas seem brighter. So I think for the Sony, I would actually just recommend playing in brightness preferred. And I think if you have an X95J, that might be one of the best TVs to play this game on, even though it doesn't have VRR, because the game's pretty solid as far as frame rate goes. So I don't think you really need the VRR in it. And the X95J is just so bright overall with the high APL, and being able to run that in brightness preferred, I'm sure would look amazing. If I still had the TV, I would do a video or show that instead. However, pretty much any LCD, like the Samsung QN90A, stuff like that, I'm sure looks really good, really bright. I know Tech with KG showed it running on his Q90T, and it is a game that it does show an advantage with LCDs, with how bright some of the outdoor areas can get. And it's not a game that, at least in the multiplayer, the competitive side, again, you don't really need those really dark blacks because you kind of want to be able to see more in shadowy areas in a competitive multiplayer game like this. Also, I do want to touch on both this and Forza Horizon 5. Pretty much came out within a week span. Both of them Microsoft Game Studios games, and they have these new horrible brightness sliders that just make no sense. They don't really give you a good image to make adjustments to them, and they're not the HDR settings aren't being set, nit-wise or anything like that. Forza's using that paper white setting. It's just, I don't know what they're doing. I don't know why they're doing it that way. Give us the thing where you adjust the brightness until it disappears or is barely visible, or one of those things that you've seen for years. That's the kind of setting that it should be. This is basically just giving you a blind setting where you have to adjust and then play and then see, and you don't get that direct comparison while you're adjusting the setting. So that's just a little rant of, I don't know what they're doing with that, but I don't like it. It's pretty much useless. So anyway, that's pretty much going to cover it. Thank you all for watching. If you liked the video, just a reminder, if you can press the like button, that helps me out. I will do some kind of follow-up probably when the campaign comes out or if anything changes. Other than that, just keep an eye out for other kinds of content on the C1 and A80J for a while, and I have an A90J coming soon. So thanks again. Have a good one. See you in the next one.